The forest was eerily quiet that cold autumn morning. A thick layer of fallen leaves covered the ground, muffling every step, every rustle. Officer Amanda Sullivan was patrolling the area after reports of suspicious activity, but something else caught her attention. A sound that sent a chill down her spine. A bark. Not just any bark, but a desperate, pleading one. It was distant, weak, almost drowned by the whispering wind, yet unmistakable. Someone or something was in trouble. Her training told her to be cautious, but her instincts told her to hurry. She moved deeper into the woods, stepping carefully over broken twigs and damp earth. The barking grew louder, more urgent. Then she saw her, a German shepherd lying in the middle of the forest floor. Her fur was matted with dirt and leaves, her ribs faintly visible beneath her coat, and her eyes, those deep brown eyes, were filled with something Amanda recognized instantly. Fear, pain, pleading. The dog didn't run, growl, or flinch. Instead, she tried to stand, her legs trembling under her own weight. She let out a low whimper and looked at Amanda with an expression that was unmistakable. "Help me." Amanda took a cautious step forward, her heart pounding. What had happened to this dog? Was she lost, abandoned, or injured? The dog took a shaky step back, then another, but not in fear. She was leading her somewhere. Then, without warning, the shepherd turned and began walking away, her movement slow but determined. She paused after a few steps and glanced back, her eyes begging Amanda to follow. Something was terribly wrong. Amanda gripped her radio, but didn't call for backup just yet. She had to see where this led. Swallowing the lump in her throat, she followed the dog deeper into the woods, unaware that what she was about to find would shatter her heart into 1,000 pieces. Amanda's pulse quickened as she followed the German shepherd. The cold air bit at her skin, but she barely noticed. Every few steps, the dog glanced back, her amber eyes filled with urgency. It was clear she was leading Amanda somewhere important. The further they went, the denser the trees became, their bare branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The officer's boots crunched against a thick layer of fallen leaves, but the sound seemed distant, overshadowed by the weight of the moment. Something about this felt different, heavier, like she was about to uncover a terrible truth. After what felt like an eternity, the shepherd suddenly stopped near the base of an old oak tree. Her body tensed, ears twitching as she let out a soft whimper. Then, with careful steps, she lowered herself to the ground, nudging something with her nose. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. She stepped closer, kneeling beside the dog, and what she saw made her stomach twist into a knot. A small bundle of black fur lay motionless beneath the dog's protective frame. Puppies. 4 of them, their tiny bodies huddled together, barely moving. Amanda's heart clenched as she realized the grim reality. These puppies were weak, their tiny ribs visible beneath their underdeveloped fur. They weren't just cold, they were starving. How long had they been out here? How had their mother kept them alive for this long? Amanda reached out, her fingers brushing gently against one of the fragile pups. It was breathing, but only just. The mother let out a soft whine, licking Amanda's hand before nudging her babies again, as if begging her to do something to save them. Amanda swallowed hard, feeling the sting of tears in her eyes. This mother had been fighting for her babies' lives, holding on with every ounce of strength she had left. But she was losing the battle. Pulling herself together, Amanda grabbed her radio. "Dispatch! This is Officer Sullivan. I need immediate animal rescue assistance at my location. I have an abandoned German shepherd and her litter in critical condition." Static crackled before a voice responded, confirming help was on the way. But Amanda knew time was running out. She couldn't just wait. Shrugging off her jacket, she carefully wrapped the trembling puppies in its warmth. Then she met the mother's tired gaze and whispered, "I've got them. I promise." The shepherd let out a shaky sigh and rested her head against Amanda's leg, as if finally allowed herself to believe that help had arrived. But as Amanda held those fragile lives in her arms, a single thought haunted her. What had happened to leave them here alone in the woods? And was the danger truly over? Amanda's breath came in shallow bursts as she carefully cradled the puppies. Their tiny bodies barely stirred against the warmth of her jacket. The German shepherd, still lying at her feet, watched her every move with tired but trusting eyes. The mother had led her here for a reason, but the nagging question remained. How had they ended up abandoned in the middle of the woods? The situation didn't sit right with Amanda. Stray dogs didn't just wind up this deep in the forest, especially not with newborn pups. Someone had left them here. Someone had wanted them gone. A gust of wind rustled the brittle leaves, and Amanda's senses sharpened. For the first time, she took in her surroundings with fresh eyes. Broken branches, disturbed dirt, faint tire tracks partially covered by fallen leaves. She wasn't alone out here. Someone had been here recently. A sinking feeling formed in her gut. Was she walking into something bigger than just a simple case of abandonment? She pressed the radio to her lips. Dispatch. Any ETA on animal rescue? Approximately 10 minutes out, Officer Sullivan. Do you require additional units? Amanda hesitated. Logic told her she should call for backup, but instinct held her back. She needed to understand what had happened here before escalating the situation. Negative for now, she responded, voice steady. Just get that rescue team here fast. The shepherd let out a low, uneasy whine, her ears perking up. Amanda followed the dog's gaze toward a narrow, overgrown trail leading further into the woods. She could feel it now, the unsettling presence of something just out of reach. Her grip tightened around the puppies as she made a decision. She had to know what was down that path. Carefully, she laid the pups back down beside their mother, making sure they were wrapped securely in her jacket. The shepherd let out a soft protest, but didn't move to stop her. As Amanda slowly rose to her feet, every muscle in her body tensed. She stepped toward the trail, the air thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else, something metallic, something wrong. Then she saw it, a dark shape, barely visible through the trees. A vehicle, old and rusted, partially concealed by brush. Amanda's pulse spiked. She reached for her flashlight, her free hand resting near her holster. She took cautious steps forward, heart hammering in her chest, as the beam of light swept over the abandoned truck. Something glinted in the dirt near the driver's side door. Amanda crouched, brushing away a layer of leaves. Her stomach twisted, blood, dried, dark, and splattered across the ground. Whoever had been here, something terrible had happened to them. Behind her, the German shepherd let out a deep, guttural growl. Amanda's blood ran cold. She wasn't just discovering the past anymore. Someone was still out there, watching. A shiver ran down Amanda's spine as the dog's growl deepened. Her ears were pricked forward, her body tense, muscles coiled as if ready to pounce. Amanda knew that kind of reaction. It wasn't just fear, it was warning. Someone was nearby, watching them. Her fingers hovered near her holster as she slowly rose to her feet, scanning the darkened woods. The trees stood motionless, their twisted branches forming jagged shadows against the gray sky. The wind had died down. The forest had gone completely silent. No birds, no rustling leaves, nothing. It was a kind of silence that came when something or someone didn't want to be heard. Amanda swallowed hard, forcing her breathing to stay steady. Her eyes darted back to the rusted truck. The dried blood at her feet wasn't old enough to be dismissed. Had someone been hurt here? Or worse, had someone been killed? She glanced at the ground again, following the faint tire tracks leading away from scene. They weren't fresh, but they weren't ancient either. Someone had driven here recently. Someone had abandoned this dog and her puppies in the middle of nowhere, and that same someone might still be close. Her grip tightened around the flashlight as she directed its beam past the truck, deeper into the forest. The underbrush was thick, the trees gnarled and overgrown. If someone was hiding, they had plenty of places to do it. The shepherd let out another low growl, stepping protectively in front of her puppies. Amanda knew she couldn't leave them defenseless. She needed to get them out of here fast. Pressing her radio to her lips, she whispered, "Dispatch, I need an update on that rescue team's ETA." The response was immediate. 5 minutes out, Officer Sullivan. Do you need additional units? A sound, faint behind her. Amanda spun around, hand on her gun, her heart slamming against her ribs. The shepherd barked a sharp, commanding sound that echoed through the empty woods. But there was nothing, just the endless stretch of trees and shadows shifting in the dim light. Amanda's mind raced. Had she imagined it? Was the tension getting to her? No. The dog had reacted too. Something had moved. She took a slow step backward, keeping her eyes locked on the darkness ahead. Her instinct screamed at her to run, to grab the puppies, the mother, and get the hell out of there. But another part of her, the cop inside her, the part that had seen enough crime scenes to recognize when something was wrong, knew she had just walked into something much bigger than an abandoned dog. A sudden rustling, this time closer, too close. Amanda exhaled sharply and drew her weapon. "This is Officer Sullivan with the County Sheriff's Department," she called, her voice firm. "If someone's out there, show yourself now." Silence. Then, just as she was about to take another step, something snapped in the distance, like a twig breaking underfoot. Not an animal, not the wind. Someone was out there, and they weren't alone. Amanda's grip tightened around her gun as she aimed into the trees, her pulse hammering in her ears. The shepherd stood beside her, tense and growling, her body half shielding the puppies still wrapped in Amanda's jacket. The snapping twig hadn't been an accident. Someone was there, watching, waiting. The forest was thick, but Amanda had been a cop long enough to recognize when someone was lurking in the shadows. The silence was deafening, thick like a fog pressing against her chest. Whoever it was, they weren't running. They were studying her, calculating their next move. Amanda swallowed hard and squared her stance. "This is Officer Sullivan with the Sheriff's Department. Step out slowly, with your hands where I can see them." Her voice was steady, controlled, but inside, her instincts were screaming. For a long, suffocating moment, nothing happened. The trees stood still. The wind refused to move. Then a shape shifted between the trunks. A dark figure, barely visible, just far enough that she couldn't make out their face. Amanda's finger hovered over the trigger. "I won't say it again. Step out now." A tense pause. Then the figure moved, but not toward her. Away. A rustling of leaves. A sudden, quiet retreat. Whoever they weren't going to confront her. They were leaving. Amanda hesitated, torn between chasing after them and protecting the helpless lives at her feet. She glanced down at the German shepherd. The dog was still staring into the woods, her ears twitching, her body rigid. She knew the danger wasn't over. Amanda pressed a radio to her lips. "Dispatch, I need backup. Now. Units are en route. ETA for minutes." "For minutes," Amanda muttered. A lifetime in a situation like this. Her mind raced. She could go after the person, try to get a glimpse of who they were, but that would mean leaving the dog and her puppies unprotected. And something told her that whoever had left them here wasn't done with them yet. Amanda made her choice. She crouched beside the shepherd and the puppies, keeping her gun close, eyes locked on the woods. If they came back, if they so much as took one step toward them, she would be ready. Then a thought hit her like ice down her spine. What if they weren't running away? What if they were circling back? Her skin prickled. She scanned the darkness around her, heart pounding. There was no way of knowing how many there were, or what they wanted. All she knew was that the shepherd had been abandoned out here for a reason, and that reason had just disappeared into the trees. But not for long. That tension is unreal. What do you think? Was the figure in the trees really leaving, or just setting Amanda up for something worse? And why was the shepherd abandoned in the first place? Drop your theories in the comments. Amanda's grip on her gun tightened as she scanned the tree line, her heart pounding in her ears. The German shepherd stood rigid at her side, her fur bristling, every instinct on high alert. The puppies remained curled in the safety of Amanda's jacket, unaware of the tension gripping the air around them. The forest had settled into a chilling stillness, but she wasn't fooled. The danger wasn't gone. It was moving, watching. Whoever had been out there hadn't just stumbled upon her. They had been waiting. Then movement. A shape darted between the trees. Fast, deliberate. Amanda caught only a glimpse, but it was enough. There was more than one. Her jaw clenched. This was an accident. These people, whoever they were, had left the dog and her puppies here for a reason, and now they were back. But for what? To check if the job had been done? To silence a witness? Whether it was a dog or her, the thought sent ice down Amanda's spine. She took a step back, positioning herself between the shepherd and the approaching threat. "I know you're out there," she called, voice firm but controlled. "Step out slowly, hand where I can see them." Silence. Then a sound that made her blood run cold. Laughter, low, mocking. Somewhere just beyond her line of sight. They weren't afraid of her. They were toying with her. The shepherd let out a deep, rumbling growl. Her ears flattened against her head. Amanda didn't need to speak the dog's language to understand. She knew who they were, and she hated them. Amanda's radio crackled. "Officer Sullivan, backup is less than 2 minutes out. Hold your position." 2 minutes. Too long. These people weren't just lurking. They were circling, testing her. And if the shepherd's reaction meant anything, it was that these weren't strangers. They were the ones who had dumped her here. The realization sent a surge of anger through Amanda's chest. They had meant for this dog and her puppies to die, and now they had come back to finish the job. Or for something worse. The laughter stopped. Footsteps, slow and controlled, came from more than one direction. They were closing in. Amanda exhaled sharply, steadying herself. No more waiting. She squared her stance, raised her gun, and took a single step forward. "Last warning," she called out, voice like steel. "Show yourselves now." A pause, a breath. Then finally, from the shadows, they stepped into the light. Amanda's breath remained steady, but every muscle in her body was coiled tight, ready to react. The shepherd at her side stiffened, her growl deepening into something primal and protective. The forest no longer felt like just a quiet stretch of land. It felt like a trap. After endless moments of circling and lurking in the shadows, they had finally decided to show themselves. From the darkness of the tree line, two figures emerged, men. Their clothes were rough and worn, their boots caked in dried mud. One was taller, broad-shouldered, with a beanie pulled low over his face. His hands were shoved into the pockets of his heavy jacket. The other was leaner, wiry, his face gaunt, eyes sharp and assessing. But what sent a chill down Amanda's spine wasn't their appearance. It was the way they looked at her, calm, almost amused, like they weren't surprised she was here, like they had been expecting her. Amanda adjusted her grip on her gun, keeping her stance strong. "Sheriff's Department. Hands where I can see them." Her voice cut through the air like a blade. The taller man smirked, lifting his hands half-heartedly, as if this were all just an inconvenience. The wiry one didn't move at all. Instead, his gaze flickered down to the German shepherd. In that instant, Amanda saw it, recognition. The dog snarled, turned savage, her teeth bared, her body trembling with fury. She knew them. She remembered them. The wiry man tilted his head, his lips curling into something that was almost a smile. "Looks like she found herself a friend," he muttered, voice slow, deliberate. His tone was casual, but his eyes told a different story. Cold, calculating, dangerous. Amanda's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about an abandoned dog anymore. There was something bigger at play. She took a step forward, gun unwavering. "You left this dog and her puppies to die out here. Why?" She wasn't expecting an answer, but the taller man chuckled, a low, amused sound that sent her nerves sparking. "Ain't your business, officer," he said, his voice dripping with something between arrogance and boredom. "But now you went and made it yours, didn't you?" Amanda's radio crackled to life. "Officer Sullivan, backup is arriving on site in 30 seconds. Hold your position." The men tensed. Their postures shifted just slightly, but enough for Amanda to see what was coming. They weren't planning on sticking around. The wiry man's fingers twitched. Amanda saw the motion before it even fully happened. A reach toward his waistband. "Don't," she barked, her gun snapping into full readiness. The shepherd lunged forward, barking with ferocious intensity, her body shielding the puppies behind her. The forest, once deadly silent, exploded into chaos the moment the wiry man's hand moved toward his waistband. Amanda's world slowed to a razor-sharp edge. Her pulse hammered, but her focus was absolute. The shepherd beside her let out a vicious snarl. Her body coiled like a spring, ready to attack. This was it, the moment everything turned. Hands up, Amanda barked, her voice cutting through the tension like a gunshot. But the wiry man smirk didn't fade. Instead, his fingers curled around something, a knife, not a gun. A blade, long and worn, gleaming dully in the dim light. His grip was tight, practiced. He had used it before. Amanda's instinct screamed. She adjusted her aim, ready to fire if he took even half a step toward her or the dogs. But it was the taller man who moved first. With a sudden, violent motion, he lunged, not at Amanda, but toward the shepherd and her puppies. The mother dog exploded into motion, snapping and twisting her jaws, clamping onto his arm before he could reach them. A strangled yell tore from his throat as she held on, refusing to let go. Amanda barely had time to react before the wiry man charged, knife raised, eyes locked onto her, like a predator closing in on its kill. No hesitation, no mercy. Amanda's training took over. She fired a single shot. The crack of the gun shattered the stillness of the forest. The man staggered, his momentum faltering. His body twisted as pain overtook him. He collapsed to his knees, the knife slipping from his grasp, hitting the dirt with a dull thud. His breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. He wasn't dead, but he wasn't a threat anymore. The taller man, still struggling against the shepherd's relentless bite, let out a choked curse. He shoved the dog away and stumbled back, his injured arm slick with blood. For a split second, his wild eyes met Amanda's, filled with something between rage and panic. Then, without warning, he turned and ran. Amanda's chest heaved as she kept her gun trained on the injured man still on the ground. The German shepherd stood firm beside her, blood staining her muscle, but her tail was raised, her stance strong. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had won. Sirens pierced the air, flashing red and blue lights flickering through the trees as backup finally arrived. But Amanda barely noticed. She knelt beside the dog, meeting her tired yet fierce gaze. "It's over," she whispered. But deep down, she knew the truth. It wasn't over. Not yet. The man who ran, he would be back. And when he came, he wouldn't come alone. The flashing red and blue lights painted the trees in a chaotic dance of color, but to Amanda, everything still felt dark. The forest, once eerily quiet, was now filled with the sounds of approaching officers, distant sirens, and the sharp crackle of police radios. Yet none of it mattered. Not yet. Her focus remained locked on the tree line, on the deep shadows beyond, where the taller man had disappeared. He was still out there. He had gotten away. And that meant this wasn't over. She forced herself to turn her attention to the man they had captured. He was still on the ground, groaning as blood seeped through the fabric of his shirt from the gunshot wound in his shoulder. One of the deputies was already securing him in cuffs. But even with pain twisting his features, there was something in his expression that made Amanda uneasy. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't begging for help or trying to plead his case. He was smiling. A deep growl rumbled from beside her. The German shepherd, her muzzle still stained with the man's blood, stood rigid, her sharp amber eyes locked on him. She remembered him. She hated him. Amanda didn't blame her. The dog had fought with everything she had to keep her puppies alive. And this man, this monster, had been willing to let them die out here, alone in the cold. But why? Amanda needed to know. She stepped closer, her jaw tight as she crouched beside him. "Why did you leave them here?" she demanded, keeping her voice low and controlled. "What were you trying to cover up?" She wasn't just asking about the dogs anymore. Something bigger was at play. She had felt it from the moment she saw the abandoned truck, the blood in the dirt. These men weren't just some reckless animal abusers. They were running from something. The man chuckled, though it came out ragged and pained. He lifted his head just enough to meet Amanda's eyes. The cold amusement in his gaze sent a shiver down her spine. "You think we just dumped some mutts and left?" he rasped. "Lady, you don't even know what you just walked into." Amanda's stomach twisted. Her instinct screamed that he was telling the truth. This wasn't about the dog, and never was. The shepherd and her puppies had been left behind not because they were unwanted, but because they had been evidence of what Amanda didn't know yet. But she was going to find out. The radio at her shoulder crackled to life. Officer Sullivan, perimeter teams report no sign of the second suspect. We're widening the search. Too late. He was already gone. Amanda clenched her jaw, frustration burning in her chest. He had run because he knew what was coming. He had run because whatever secret they had buried in these woods, it was worth killing for. And now that Amanda had stepped into it, she was a problem. The injured man grinned despite his pain. You should have just walked away, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Amanda didn't blink. Too bad for you, she shot back, standing tall. I don't walk away. Beside her, the German shepherd let out another low warning growl. Amanda ran a hand over the dog's head, feeling the tension still rippling through her. This dog had suffered, had fought to protect her puppies, and despite everything, she was still standing. But as Amanda looked toward the darkness of the forest, she knew the truth. The man who escaped would be back. And when he came, he wouldn't be alone. Amanda stood motionless, her gaze locked on the darkness beyond the trees. The wind had picked up, rustling the brittle leaves beneath her boots, but her mind was elsewhere, on the man who had escaped, on what he was willing to do to keep his secrets buried. The German shepherd stayed close to her side, her body still tense, ears twitching at every sound. She wasn't just on edge. She was waiting. She knew this wasn't over. The puppies remained bundled in Amanda's jacket, too weak to understand the danger that still loomed. But Amanda understood. The fight wasn't finished. Behind her, the injured suspect groaned as he was hauled to his feet by two deputies. He staggered, still cuffed, his face twisted in pain. But his smirk hadn't faded. You don't get it, do you? He rasped, his voice rough but mocking. You think this is done? You think because you got me it's over? Over? He let out a weak chuckle, shaking his head. He's gonna come back, officer. And when he does, his grin widened. You won't be ready. Amanda's fists clenched. She had spent years dealing with criminals. But this felt different. This wasn't just about lawbreaking. This was about cruelty, a deliberate evil. And now, she was caught in the middle of it. The shepherd let out a low, deep growl as if she understood every word. The radio at Amanda's shoulder crackled. Officer Sullivan, be advised we have reports of a vehicle approaching from the east. No plates, no headlights, moving slow. Amanda's stomach dropped. He was coming back. She had two choices. She could wait for reinforcements and risk another chase through the woods, or she could end this now. She looked at the dog, at the way she braced herself, at the fire still burning in her tired amber eyes. Amanda had no doubt that this dog wanted justice just as much as she did. She turned to the deputies. Secure him in a unit. Keep your eyes on the tree line, she ordered. Then, pressing the radio, she spoke with absolute certainty. I'm not waiting for him to make the first move. I'm going to stop him before he gets the chance. Without another word, Amanda moved toward the road, the shepherd right at her side. The headlights of the unknown vehicle finally appeared through the trees, creeping forward, like a predator stalking its prey. He wasn't running this time. He was coming back to clean up his mess. Amanda stepped into the road, gun raised. Out of the vehicle, hands where I can see them. For a moment, nothing happened. The car sat idling, the engine humming, the driver hidden behind the glare of the windshield. Then, the door swung open. A figure stepped out, his silhouette tense, unmoving. Amanda's breath slowed. The shepherd growled, her stance strong despite everything she had been through. This wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about the dog. It was about stopping whatever these men had done and making sure they never did again. The man took a slow step forward. Amanda didn't flinch. This ends now, she said, her voice like steel. And then the final fight began. If you love this story, leave a like and subscribe. It helps bring more incredible content and ensures you won't miss the next videos. Comment below what you would have done in Amanda's place. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story.